Hello, this is Altruistic Utopia. All I can do in these videos is to share with you, from the bottom of my heart, the enlightening experiences I've had throughout my life, including my health. Today's topic isn't even particularly endearing. It's about why you're still middle class despite your best efforts, or why you're poor despite not being middle class. So today we're going to cut right to the chase. If you're middle class or poor, it's very hard to overcome that poverty. That's just the reality of it. Avoid anyone who tells you it's easy. They're scammers. Why is it hard? The answer is because the software is different. The subconscious, unconscious operating system, the software, is different. The software you need doesn't exist, and you're trying, struggling, and failing to do it. What does that mean? Why doesn't it exist? And how does it affect your life? I'm going to tell you all about it, including how you can replace this software. I trust you'll gain a new perspective by the end of this video. You might be thinking, is my life doomed without that subconscious software? No, you can download it. What does that even mean? You're probably trying to be frugal. But the truth is, you can buy anything you want if you want. You can splurge a little, get an interest-free credit card, and just buy it. But usually, you don't buy. I know better than anyone that I'm saving for something that's not for today. It's the same with international travel. I'd love to go twice a year, but I only go once, and then I'll go again the following year. But being frugal really means tightening your belt. Going without things you want to do, things you want to have, things that are within your means but that you could do with a little extra, also falls under the category of frugality. Most people do that, at least to some extent. You probably invest a lot, too. If someone says, "Someone I know made a lot of money with this," you ask what it is, you're interested, and you actually invest your money in it. And even if you don't know much about stocks, you'll buy a little bit of this and a little bit of that, starting with Tesla and Apple, because everyone around you is doing it. I've had over 50 people tell me their stories, including people who changed jobs because they got a raise because they thought they didn't have enough basic seed money. They all moved to a job that was at least a little higher than their previous job. You've bumped up your salary, you've worked overtime, you've worked weekends, you've taken all the overtime pay, you've taken the performance pay, you've done everything you can. I worked my tail off, but I never became wealthy. I apologize if anything I've said so far has offended you. But how can I say all of this? The reason I can say it with confidence is because I've done it all. I've done it all, and I'm not rich. But I've worked really hard for that life. I know there are some people who think, I just go with the flow, but I don't think there are many people who watch my videos. You're all working really hard. You don't want to go to work, you don't get enough sleep on weekdays, you're stressed all the time, you suffer from Monday sickness, you're just going through the motions from morning to night. And in the midst of that, they have to find time to learn about self-improvement, finance, investing, and saving. You're juggling it all. I've been there, and I don't think you're any different. One thing is clear. Living hard, fiercely, and to the point of exhaustion doesn't make us rich. I'm sure you can relate to that. But every once in a while, you see someone who was poor become rich. Or middle class and then rich. What I'm saying is that it's very difficult, but it can be done if you know how. You can do it too. All you need to know is how to program software into your subconscious mind, If you know how to invest in real estate or analyze stock charts, that helps, but it's not the solution. It's luck and it's temporary. It's like a disaster grant. It's a one-time thing. If you don't invest it at the right time, you have to look elsewhere. But if you know what I'm talking about, you'll be able to get over that fence that you couldn't get over even if you work day in and day out. If you think I'm stating the obvious, you can stop watching this video right now. Because you probably won't be able to anyway. You might be thinking, how can I be so sure? Well, it's because I did it 20 years ago, or 15 years ago. Back then, it was just a nagging feeling that I didn't want to hear. But now, by my standards, I'm doing pretty well. Of course, there are a lot of people who have a lot more absolute wealth than I do. I've never been a CEO of a major corporation or an owner of a major corporation. I've just been a regular salaryman. Well, Not exactly a salaryman. I was a salaryman who got scammed and lost all the money I had saved as a young man. For the record, I still haven't found my money. But when I think about it, going from having no money to having this much money is my definition of wealth. And I'm going to tell you the most important thing I did along the way. It's most important that I tell you how I did it. You have to be born to do this. It only happens to people who have an uncanny ability to invest. None of these are true. It's not like that at all. If it were, the lucky ones would just sit on the couch and watch Netflix until they got rich. If you're not lucky, you're not going to get rich no matter what you do, no matter how hard you work, no matter how much effort you put in. You could give it all up and live as a YOLO. But I don't. We both know that's not completely right. What would I have said 10 years ago? I wish I would have thought, now that I have a good, stable job, I'm going to use it as a springboard to invest wisely and get rich, but my subconscious software didn't work that way. When I think back, I remember how my mind worked. Oh, I'm so lucky to have such a stable, good job right now. I have job security, I get a decent paycheck every month, I have a separate pension plan, and my life is going well. I didn't think this way 10 years ago because I was young and inexperienced. It's because I look at my juniors coming in 10 years later and they're thinking the same thing. And most of them are not wealthy. Very few people in our society are wealthy. And there's a reason for that. Because the concept of wealth, the idea of wealth itself, is not embedded in the subconscious and unconscious mind. The concept of wealth and affluence is not built into the operating system. Windows, Mac OS, whatever operating system you're thinking of. You can't rise out of poverty or the middle class and become wealthy because the concept of wealth or being wealthy is not downloaded into the operating system. The exception, of course, is to appear wealthy on the outside. Without software, the concept of being rich can't be realized. It doesn't exist, so how can it be realized? It has to be something, right? And the criteria for being rich will be different for everyone. It's enough for you to be able to say to yourself, oh, I'm really rich now. Because you know best. Because you know yourself best. If I have this much, I'm rich. Let me tell you what happens if you don't have this unconscious software installed. Let me tell you what happened to me and many others 10 years ago. I told you that my unconscious program didn't have a concept of wealth in the first place. Rich people and I were completely different. It was like a different world. And then it got weird around me. I start to have the illusion that everyone is wealthier than average. All my coworkers look richer than me. They have land somewhere, they have a couple of houses, they own a lot of assets, expensive cars, and they travel abroad a few times a year. Compared to that, I'm humble. I'm not wealthy, but it's human nature to want to appear wealthy. Of course, some people will never give up. But they are in the minority. Most people don't. In this situation, most people start acting this way. They start buying things to look wealthy. They start buying fancy cars and fancy bags. They start traveling abroad and taking Instagram photos at fancy resorts and hotels. By the sounds of it, 80% of the people in your company look like wealthy people. But as you all know, that's not the case. The reality is that almost all of them are people who can't afford to take a pay cut. So everybody dresses up to look rich and walks around like that, and I follow suit, and I act like that, and everybody else who sees me is dressed up to look like they're rich too. But in reality, everybody's playing a game of getting poorer and poorer, with more and more debt to pay off and less cash to invest. They're in a league of their own. So what's the real reason everyone is getting sucked into the so-called get-rich-quick cycle that affects everyone? Comparison, bravado, showing off, showmanship, name-calling, jealousy. These are just people's feelings on the surface, but not the underlying reasons. The real reason is that it's hard to get rich, and even if you do, you don't know when, so you have to set yourself up to stand out right now, and that's what's happening right now. So it's not software for the rich, it's software for the poor. That's the root cause. It's not your fault that you feel the comparison, the bravado, the showmanship, the jealousy, and it's not because you lack character or are pathetic. It's not your fault. It's just because your software is middle class or poor. You just did the best you could with the software you were given. Now let's analyze an old, almost proverbial expression. The rich keep getting richer and the poor keep getting poorer. Why is that? First and foremost, is this statement accurate? In general, yes. But why is it true? We usually think of it this way: being rich means having a lot of money, and I got an inheritance, so isn't that true? Well, it's all true because we all start from different places. But notice the word analyze I mentioned. On the surface, they seem to be right. But rich and poor people have different software installed in their subconscious minds, which leads them down different paths. You might be wondering what that software is and how it differs from other software. The subconscious mind has one important setting that separates good software from bad software. That is whether there is a threshold or limit. The middle class is set up to maximize themselves to the point where they can't escape their limits. The poor are set up to maximize their ability to act just enough to stay poor. Who the hell decides that? Who decides when you're out of the middle class and almost out of poverty? You decide. It's done by your subconscious or unconscious mind. The important thing is that you don't recognize it. As a result, you get frustrated and blame various factors. You blame your parents, your environment, and yourself because that's all you can do. You don't think to look beyond, you don't think to try, you don't practice. You don't recognize that you are the one setting the limits. Dr. Return, a stem cell and brain scientist, says this: your life is a product of your subconscious mind. That's why the poor get poorer and the rich get richer. He goes into great detail about the brain science behind the subconscious software I discussed. It's long and complicated, so I'll just summarize the highlights. The life program we create when we're 7 years old is responsible for 95% of our lives. Everyone downloads this program in the first 7 years of their lives. Dr. Return verified this with brainwave tests. The measurements show that children under 7 have different brain waves than adults. They have more theta waves than adults. If you're wondering how kids get those downloads, all you have to do is watch them. They watch their parents, they watch their siblings, they watch things like that, and they just get that download for the first 7 years of their life. Even in Robert Kiyosaki's Rich Dad, Poor Dad, he basically says that if you are born into a poor family, you will try to be rich all your life, but you will never be rich, and if you are born into a rich family, you can be stupid all your life, but you can still be rich. All of this is due to unconscious behavior. Behaviors that are simply instilled in children who grow up with wealthy parents. So they unconsciously do the right things to become rich. The same is true for poor people. Poor people have software that they downloaded completely from their family. Life is supposed to be hard. It's harder than I thought. We're not rich, and because we're programmed that way, we're going to sabotage ourselves 95% of our lives. As Dr. Return says, these programs keep the poor poorer and the richer richer. Do you realize how scary it is to have these limits downloaded and set in your subconscious mind? In psychology, this is called self-limiting behavior. We make so many decisions in life that we can't keep track of them all. And when we limit ourselves, we don't make the best choice for every choice. Instead of choosing the best, you choose the next best, and sometimes the worst. These bad decisions pile up, and they become your future self. So what does your future look like? What will be the result of all those bad decisions? It's not hard to predict the outcome. The real problem is that you inherited your limitations. They've already been downloaded into your subconscious mind against your will. That's what rich people do. We can't do that. Rich people are just born that way. But rich people can't even blame their parents. They can't blame their parents because they inherited it from them. Do you know the story of the flea? It's about a flea in a glass. A flea can usually jump 100 times its own size. So you catch a flea and put it in a glass with a lid. The flea doesn't notice the lid at first and keeps bumping into it. The flea will feel pain from repeatedly bumping into the lid. At some point, the flea starts to jump just high enough to avoid hitting the lid. Here's a fun fact. When you open the lid again a few days later, the flea is still only jumping to the height of the glass. The flea hasn't jumped back up to its original height. The flea is trapped inside the cup. A flea born in that cup would likely die without realizing that it has the ability to jump 100 times its body length. There is a similar story about elephants. When an elephant is young, it is purposely tied to a tree with a highly visible bright orange rope. At first, the baby elephant tries several times to break the rope. Then it realizes it can't and takes a risk. Eventually, it gives up and hangs out with the orange rope. The problem is that when that elephant grows up and becomes a full-grown elephant, its strength is about 100 times stronger. Its strength is said to be capable of uprooting trees. For such an elephant, an orange rope would break too easily. But if you show the elephant the orange rope you tied as a child and tie it together, the elephant won't struggle. That's because it has witnessed the strength of the orange rope as a child, so it thinks that orange rope is a no-no. Are you in the same situation as the flea in the glass or the elephant on the rope right now? I'll explain how to fix the last piece of software you downloaded. Fortunately, unlike the flea or the elephant, we are human. Just like we can set limits for ourselves, we can change our programs. Let me say that again. We're human. Brain scientists have long argued that we can do this through hypnosis and repetition. I, too, was able to use hypnosis and repetition to change a program that had plagued me for nearly 30 years, since it was first downloaded when I was 7 years old. And I was able to achieve the financial freedom I have today. I sought out books and talks by Dr. Joe Dispenza and Dr. Return. In one of those talks, Dr. Return said something that stuck with me. You have to fake it until you make it. If you're not currently happy but want to be, try repeating, "I am happy," throughout the day. You might be wondering, what am I doing? But brain science shows that this works wonders. You're telling your subconscious over and over again. And this programmed subconscious mind determines 95% of our lives. To do this, you need to do it every day. The reason you do it every day is because repetition is key. Repetition forms habits. And that habit will change the programming in your subconscious mind, in your unconscious mind. To change the software in your subconscious mind, say what you want out loud, write it down, or visualize it in your head, and then repeat the action every day. Of course, it's a lot harder than it sounds. Trust me, I've been doing it for years. It's probably 10 times harder than you think. The process of doing it every day. But if you can change your life, if you can live the life you really want, if you can get rich, and finally, if you're desperate, it won't seem so hard. Finally, remember this. Life doesn't happen to you, it happens for you.